Hello, Culture Brief listeners. This is Connor, and I've got Micah here with me as well. And we are starting off this episode a little bit different than normal. We'll get to the regular episode here in just a few minutes, but we wanted to hop in here real fast because after we recorded the episode that is coming out today, Thursday, we recorded on Wednesday morning, just a few hours later, the terrible events in Utah on the Utah Valley University campus occurred where conservative influencer, I guess is the best way to put it, Charlie Kirk, was shot and killed. He was shot from over 200 yards away, and it is just terrible. And so we wanted to address that real fast before we get into the full episode, because this has been a very large situation. The country is mourning. The country feels heavy today as we just mourn the loss of a very influential person. I don't think it matters your politics. You cannot deny the influence that Charlie Kirk had on America, on politics, and in particularly on young people, not just in politics either. He was a man of faith. And so we are sad here at Denison Forum, knowing that this life is lost and knowing that his wife and two young children no longer have their husband, no longer have their dad. And so we wanted to address that. So Micah, I'm just going to hand it off to you to see if you have anything to say up front.
Yeah, I mean, it's jarring, and I would say something, another shooting today at a school in Colorado where there were 3 kids injured. I think they were junior high or high schoolers, whatever it might be. Terrible. And that just kind of slips away just because of the magnitude of what happened today with Charlie Kirk. Yeah, I mean, I just think incredibly influential guy. And I'm only going to say this once because I don't want to keep prefacing it, because I'd like to think that no matter how you feel politically, whether if you disagreed with him or agreed with him or not, if someone is killed for their ideals, if someone is killed for traveling to college campuses and having generally pretty healthy debate with people, he was killed for being effective. He was killed for making a difference in the lives of many people and really kind of shaping a lot of where the country is heading politically. I mean, he was 31 years old. And if anything, people in our age bracket, Connor, feel probably more connected to him than even a lot of others do, because it just kind of feels like he rose to prominence when social media somewhat rose to prominence, and he just got bigger and bigger. And he wasn't perfect. Nobody is. But goodness gracious, this is America. And this was clearly a political assassination, and it just feels really wrong. Feels very heavy.
Very heavy, very emotional day. And just seeing the discourse, a lot of people online on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, where it's just obviously the center of conversation on this day, and I'm sure it will be for the next few days. A lot of people on the right and the left are recognizing just how terrible this is, and that Charlie, whether you didn't agree with him or not, he was doing it the right way. He was trying to have open discourse and debate. That's what he was doing in the moment he was shot, was answering a question actually about mass shootings in America. And it was somebody trying to pin him with a question and back him into a corner, but he was really good about answering respectfully and bringing forth his values and his thoughts. And then a lot of times, he'd bring Christ into the conversation. He loved to do that. He loved to show young people why he did what he did. And he always pointed back to Jesus as the main point of his conversations, and of course also pointing to his political leanings as well. Man, he had a massive, massive influence in the audience. I think he had like 7 million followers on TikTok, millions more on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter. He had the ear of President Trump. He had the ear of pretty much everybody in the Republican circle. So he was just one of those influential people who never ran for elected office, but felt like he was a political individual, as just because of how much weight he carried in the political world. He was constantly on podcasts. The man worked all the time, either his own shows or other podcasts, big ones like Megyn Kelly and Patrick Bet-David's show, that he was always on there. And I know a lot of the Republican influencers have shed tears today on their shows live. I've seen Ben Shapiro cry. I've seen Megyn Kelly cry just in clips on social media, because this is the kind of man that they knew, and they knew him well. They were like, this is a young man who cared about this country. He cared about his family, and he cared about his faith. And so it is just a devastating loss for so many who knew him and for so many who were influenced by him. And yeah, you're right. It is a political assassination. The Utah governor, Spencer Cox, came out to the press conference and kind of started off his spiel with that. He's like, to be clear, this is a political assassination. And I want to remind everyone, he also said this, that they still have the death penalty here in Utah. That's what he said. And he's not holding back. He's like, we're going to bring justice to this. Now, as of right now, we are recording at 7:30 p.m. Central on Wednesday night, and They just released a second subject that they had in custody. They have arrested 2 people today that they took in for interest and for interrogation. They've released both of those individuals. So right now, there is technically a suspect at large. By the time you're listening to this, hopefully they have caught the individual or individuals who have committed this heinous act, and we get some just understanding of who this person is, and we see justice brought down. But right now, we don't know who it is, and we are just waiting eagerly to find out more. Yeah, and President Trump, he's ordered all American flags across the country to be lowered to half staff until Sunday night. Even the New York Yankees just held a moment of silence right before we hopped on this recording, saw that. And online, man, there is some political discourse. There's some people on the left who are trying to say, look, this is what happens when you speak certain things or whatnot. But I can't disagree with that more. I don't think any rhetoric deserves any sort of violence in response. No matter how much you think that they deserve that, it's just not the case. And as Christians, we believe in life, and we believe that everybody deserves their chance at life. And that goes from unborn all the way to 150 years old, whatever it is. They deserve life, and Charlie did not deserve to die today. And so we're sad. This is heavy, and this is heavy for America. We have to sit here and kind of process this and recognize, man, this is a very public figure who was just trying to do what's right in conversations and talking to young students and trying to help them form their ideas and their morals and their values. And then he's killed in the middle of that. And of course, the videos are horrific. If you've seen any of those, if you haven't, I don't suggest watching them. They're really hard to witness. Yeah, it's just
that's a
heavy.
That's a tough part of living in 2025. You know, you get sent a video or you're scrolling and you see something you wish you didn't see. So I wish I hadn't seen some of those videos today. Something I feel like we shouldn't have to see. I think I'm just processing through like why this hurts so much. And I think, yes, Charlie is someone that I respected. I know that you and I both respected him for the way that he went about things. And I think that, and the impact that he was making. But I think it hurts even worse just because it just kind of feels like just another straw that's attempting to break the camel's back. Yeah, it feels like our union, feels like our country is just kind of bursting at the seams. Everything from school shootings to political assassination attempts, to just, you're going to hear later in this episode how America just seems to be losing hope right now. And so it just feels really heavy. It just feels like one extra thing. And it just happened to a guy that didn't deserve it. And it happened to a guy who has a wife and who has 2 young children that are going to grow up without a father. And he was 31 years old. And so it's a tough pill to swallow because he was killed because he was effective in what he did, and he was killed for his ideals. And that's just a scary thing here in America, land of the free, home of the brave. That's just kind of a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. Free speech is one of the rights we're given here in America. And today, a lot of people were able to use their free speech rights, and Charlie was using his. And the government did not take him out, but somebody did because they disagreed with his statements. I want to read real fast. So during all of this, obviously there's lots of breaking news. There's going to continue to be breaking news through this whole thing. But we here at Dennison Forum wanted to respond. Dr. Jim Dennison quickly wrote a special edition daily article. Some of you who are subscribed to Dennison Forum got that daily article in your inbox. You can find it at dennisonforum.org. It's really insightful. I think Jim did a great job of profiling who Charlie was even before he was prominent, kind of his background and growing up, and then obviously what he was up to and his college campus tours, his Turning Point USA conferences that are so big, his influence in the political circles. But I wanted to read kind of the end here of what Jim wrote in this article because I thought it was really good. So Jim wrote, he died doing what he loved to do, debating and advancing issues that mattered to the nation he sought to serve. Now we pray for his wife and 2 small children, asking God's grace and peace for them in their unspeakable loss and grief. We pray for the shooter to be apprehended before further violence is committed. We pray for those in the public eye that they would have the courage of their convictions and the protection of civil society. And we pray for Christians to be salt and light in a decaying and darkened culture desperate for both. Speaking the truth in love today, as quoted in Ephesians 4:15, has never been more dangerous or more needed than today. So just take that and remember to be praying for Charlie, but also all those who are working on this investigation and for our country and for Christians and public figures. Yeah, there's just so much to be praying for in this moment. and hopefully we can be unified. You're right, there's so much division here, Micah, and I know you're going to hit on that later in this episode. And, there has been other political assassination attempts this year, including in Minnesota. 2 state representatives were killed by a man. That United Healthcare CEO was killed by Luigi Mangione back in December. That's not political, but it had political leanings. And then, of course, Trump last year, 2 attempts on his life. So it's just scary. We haven't had moments like this since really the 60s that I can think of, when there were so many assassinations and assassination attempts. And it's not right.
Yeah, I mean, Gerald Ford was shot, remember? And then
Yes.
Ronald Reagan was shot too.
True.
So 70s and 80s, again, guys, Connor and I are not even 30 yet.
True.
To age us out, right? So, we're walking through this and navigating this like everybody else is. I mean, hopefully, we know what our hope lies in, and we know what truth is, and we know who's in control. I mean, and I definitely could not have put that better than Jim did. And, just remember that Dr. Jim Dennison and Dr. Mark Turman are also recording a special edition episode of the Faith and Clarity podcast that will be released Thursday on September 11th. So 9/11, and we're going to be putting out a lot of content about that as well. So be on the lookout for that as well.
And we will link these. We'll link that podcast episode and the article I mentioned by Jim in our show notes. So if you're looking for that, you can find that right here in your Apple Podcast or Spotify app.
Yep. So just want to leave you with a couple of things, a few verses that really struck me, but also just saw one of the last things that Charlie Kirk tweeted was 4 days ago, September 6th. He tweeted, "Jesus defeated death so you can live," period. So Charlie Kirk tweeted that this past Saturday, September 6th. My wife was telling me that Charlie Kirk's wife was posting all of these photos just recently, like in the last few days, of their time together as a family, and just how they really value that time, and they're really seeking to take advantage of that time. They know how important it is, and life is short. And she's like saying all of these things, and you almost think, man, did God give them that perspective?
Yeah, it's almost
and
prophetic.
I would just like to believe that they really soaked it up together. You know what I mean? And then he went out doing what he loved to do. As Jim mentioned, he went out doing exactly what he was put on this earth to do. Just to kind of find a glimmer of hope in that. Well, let me end it with this. 1 Corinthians 12:54-58 says this: "When the perishable puts on the imperishable, and the moral puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that's written, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law, but thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, be immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain." Let's remember Charlie and remember everybody that's been lost, whether if it's mass shootings or other politically motivated assassinations or assassination attempts, really anything, really anybody that we've lost when we think about the grief that we might be feeling, or people that we have lost, family and loved ones. Let's honor all of those that we've lost, including Charlie, by committing everything that we do to the Lord, and be steadfast, be immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that when you work unto the Lord, your labor is not in vain. And so you can enjoy the rest of this episode. We'll break down all the biggest news and top stories, but thanks for letting us jump in at the beginning of this one to give you guys an update, and we will touch on this subject more in next week's edition of Culture Brief.
Hi, I'm Connor Jones.
I'm Micah Tomasella.
And this is Culture Brief, a Denison-informed podcast where we are navigating the constant stream of top stories in news, politics, sports, pop culture, and so much more. And we're doing it all from a Christian perspective. And Micah, we have a loaded show today. It's been a crazy week in culture, and so we got to talk about a lot. You want to give us a rundown on what that's going to be?
Yes, Connor, I'd love to hit the highlights. So first and foremost, Connor is going to break down for us the Department of Defense change to the Department of War and all of the corresponding headlines with that. I'm going to talk about how there's a serious crisis of hope in America and what we can do about it, what we can say about it, and how we can make an impact in and through it. Connor has a pretty good hot take for us today. We're going to talk about Putin and Zelensky. We're going to talk about Israel and Gaza, MTV Music Awards, Apple announcements, NFL, and so much more. Let's jump into The Brief.
The Brief. Okay, yeah, like Micah mentioned, you might have heard the Department of Defense is now kind of renamed the Department of War. Depends on who you ask. And so I want to just hit on several headlines that are happening within our Defense Department, our War Department, whatever you want to call it this week, because there's been a lot going on across the world and even closer to home. So let's hit on that stuff. But I want to start off with just, we recognize that if you're listening today on Thursday, the day this episode publishes, it is September 11th. And so we want to just call out a remembrance for the lives, 2,977 lives that were lost that day. And obviously countless more in the years since that have died from illness related to 9/11 recovery and rescue and all of that. Lots of people have unfortunately gotten sick in the years since. So that death toll is way higher than what we originally know it as. Anyways, we are, of course, always praying and remembering the families who lost so many loved ones that day, friends and everybody. Dark day in our history, but also it did unite our country for a time at least. And so we're walking through that unitedness or dividedness, whatever it is you want to talk about in today's current environment, but we will never forget 9/11. Okay.
Right.
Secretary of War. Have you ever heard that term before, Micah?
Well, that's what they were referred to, pre-World War II, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the Secretary of Defense is Pete Hegseth, but now, according to an executive order that Trump signed last week, the entire Department of Defense and Secretary of Defense name has changed. It's now the Department of War or the Secretary of War. Now, this is only in some regards. It has to go through Congress to get everybody to approve the full change so that everything can change. But as we know with Trump, he likes to just do things on his own and do it his way. And so they're going to go ahead and just start. I think right. I think the White House will start calling Pete Hegseth the Secretary of War. He changed his label on his door in his office, and they're going to start calling the Department of War. Do you have any initial just thoughts on the entire name change? Do you like this name change? Are you like, man, this is game changing, or is it just a nothing burger?
It's semantics, right? It's some political theater. It's also some theater in the international affairs, right? Just showing those who maybe aren't our allies or are more adversaries that we're serious. And it might be a small thing. You know, I don't really think it changes much either way because technically, right, he can't change it without an act of Congress, but it can be a second name and they can, the White House will say it. Pete Hegseth will refer himself to it. But technically, it's the Department of Defense unless Congress acts and moves, which they very well could. I kind of liken this situation to the Gulf of America name change, where it was changed from Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. I'm like, cool, sounds good. And then I just kind of want to move on. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it doesn't really.
Have you seen people getting mad about it? Have you seen people getting upset about it?
I saw more people get mad about the Gulf of Mexico name change than I have this because I just don't think that this really impacts anybody. This is a very insider DC thing and global thing. Obviously, Trump is doing it. Yes, you're right. It is a rebrand, just like Gulf of America or like Mount McKinley. They changed back to that name.
Yes.
He loves to rebrand things. Branding is like his thing. Like he loves to just make it what he wants it to be. And in this sense, it's reverting back to an old name that was pre-World War II. It used to be the Secretary of War and Department of War. And his intention apparently is to show that, war in the name conveys a more powerful and assertive posture compared to like defense, which, they consider as overly euphemistic. The historical appeal is there as well. The Department of War has a legacy of winning wars, World War II, World War I, War of 1812. And to be honest, post-World War II wars have not exactly gone great other than the Gulf War in the early 90s. For America. So there's a lot of legacy history with the Department of Defense that may not be seen as something that's positive. It is part of that ongoing trend, though, right, of just rebrands all around. Meanwhile, Trump also used the name in a Truth Social post this past week with a meme. It's an AI drawn-up meme. It's depicting him in a Vietnam War movie. You've maybe seen this, Micah, Apocalypse Now, the 80s movie about the Vietnam War, essentially. And it's got him in there acting like he's the general. And in the background, it's the city of Chicago is Black Hawk helicopters. And the graphic, instead of Apocalypse Now, it says Shapocalypse Now for Chicago. And in the caption, he wrote, "I love the smell of deportations in the morning. Chicago is about to find out why it's called the Department of War." So, he's already started to use it. That was a very controversial meme that he posted. It did not land well with a lot of people, at least in Chicago. And on the left, but there's your first use of the Department of War in a social media post.
Sometimes you just have to take a step back, no matter how you feel about the president or about that post specifically, and say, my goodness gracious, What an interesting time that we live in.
2025.
The president of the United States is using artificial intelligence, okay, to then depict himself as a general in the Vietnam War, but then relating it to Chicago and saying he loves the smell of deportations in the morning. My goodness, it is just an ultimate troll move that you don't typically see from a president, but also he's using AI like that. I mean, 2025, guys, we have arrived. It is an interesting time to be alive.
It is. That is a great way to put it. It is an interesting time to be alive. No matter how you feel, you certainly look at that and you're like, wow, that's different than past presidencies for sure.
Just take a deep breath, take a step back and be like, wow. Like, interesting times.
One of the other posts that he did, an AI post, was literally he had sumo wrestling the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, and former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, and they were sumo wrestling. And I was like, this is our president. This is what he's doing. Oh my gosh. It doesn't matter how you feel. It's just unreal to just sit and watch this. Anyways, back to the Department of War headlines. Last week, we mentioned that the U.S. did a drone strike on a Venezuelan cartel boat that killed 11 Venezuelan cartel members of the TDA cartel. That obviously opened up like a whole new phase of the war on drugs. It's a total departure from the U.S.'s previous strategy, which was generally just the Coast Guard arresting cartel members out at sea and then bringing them in and confiscating the drugs. But, the Trump administration called them narco terrorists. That's a term you may not have heard before, but basically they're saying these are terrorist organizations. They're just different than what we generally think of with terrorism, right? And because they've got that designation as a terrorist organization, that does open the door to more direct military intervention as a national security interest. And so a lot has happened since that strike last week. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, it's currently the Department of State, right? So we'll see if that name changes too. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio said it will happen again, talking about the strike on this boat. It will happen again if dangerous cartels keep trying to traffic drugs into America. We're going to take on wherever they're operating against the interests of the United States. What will stop them is when you blow them up, when you get rid of them. So obviously the administration believes that the Venezuelan government supports the drug cartels and that the strike was really, was intended to be a deterrent to other cartels, any other people getting on boats to come towards America with drugs. But it's also supposed to send a message to that Venezuelan dictator, Nicolas Maduro. The Justice Department has a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head. He's not a good guy. He's holding his country hostage, essentially. They're in a terrible economic situation, but he's making a lot of money. He's obviously part of the cartel money just grind there. So there's a lot to that. He also had Venezuelan F-16s fly right over a U.S. Navy destroyer last week. That did not make the U.S. happy. That made the Navy very mad. So they have started sending in more warships, more aircraft to the Caribbean. There's now, I believe, 8 warships in the Caribbean. There's 10 F-35s. That is our top tier fighter jet now stationed in Puerto Rico, ready to respond to anything. So they are putting the pressure on Pete Hegseth and Trump and anybody else in charge at the Pentagon, putting the pressure on Venezuela and these cartels to say, hey, we're not messing with this anymore. You are our enemy. We see you as terrorists, and we are going to take you out. And don't threaten us with your little F-16s that we sold you in the 1980s. That's not going to do it. That's the way that they were trying to message this. Yeah, we did. Yeah, we sold them a group of F-16s in the 80s before Hugo Chavez took over the country and became a dictator in the 90s. Venezuela was actually kind of a friend. They're oil country. We needed their oil, And so, yeah,
and those are the F-16s they used?
Yeah, that's all they have left. They're not exactly in a strong military and economic position to.
That's an interesting little storyline.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting. Same thing happened with Iran. They used the jets that we sold them in the 70s and 80s against us. So, maybe we should be better about who we sell aircraft to.
Yeah. What's the deal, man? Goodness, buyer's remorse, seller's remorse.
Yeah, literally. All of this to say, there's a bunch of people who are upset about the strike. They're saying it was an extrajudicial killing, that these people didn't have the chance to go to trial. They weren't arrested, all of that. How can the U.S. prove that they were carrying drugs and had malintentions, everything? The U.S. says they've got intelligence that says, they were carrying drugs to come to America. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, did go down to the Caribbean and talk to troops this week on ships, and basically was just like, trying to encourage them. He says, what you're doing right now, it's not training. You're trained, you're prepared, you're ready, and you're lethal. You will no longer allow the poisoning of the American people. So that's kind of the mantra that the U.S. is going in with. These leaders of the U.S. military are trying to say, they may not be landing on our shores with bombs and weapons, but they are landing on our shores with drugs that are meant to kill essentially. Fentanyl is very deadly if that's what they were carrying, but also they're obviously stopping cocaine and anything else that's coming into our country that is poisonous, right? So this whole thing kind of spilled over into an X fight, Twitter, aka, between Vice President J.D. Vance and another Republican senator. So it started off with J.D. Vance posting kind of after the strike a few days later. He said, killing cartel members who poison our fellow citizens is the highest and best use of our military. This liberal ex-influencer, his name's Brian Krasenstein, he responded by saying to J.D. Vance, killing the citizens of another nation who are civilians without any due process is called a war crime. So that's a pretty hefty accusation, war crime accusation there, right? JD responded, I don't give an expletive what you call it. Okay, so JD's like, I don't really care what you're saying, right? So then Rand Paul, senator from Kentucky, a Republican senator nonetheless, just ridicules JD Vance, our vice president. He says, JD Vance says killing people he accuses of a crime is the highest and best use of the military. Did he ever read To Kill a Mockingbird? Did he ever wonder what might happen if the accused were immediately executed without trial or representation? What a despicable and thoughtless sentiment it is to glorify killing someone without a trial. So, Micah, we got a little intra-party fighting there. That's a pretty harsh response to the vice president of the United States from a man within his own party, a very powerful senator. So I'm not sure what's going to happen there. What I will say is, obviously now we've got this Department of Defense, Department of War, whatever you want to call it. If, as I think about this from a spiritual perspective, obviously I think we all wish we could have a Department of Peace. That's not a thing though, right? And that's because that's just not how the world works, because the world is fallen and man is fallen. And we always have wars and conflicts going on. And this is not just in global wars. This is in our own internal conflict, our own internal wars, our own spiritual wars with the devil, with our own enemy, right? And so that's just part of sin. It's part of the fallen world. And wars, honestly, they've existed from the beginning of time. If you read the Old Testament, they're littered throughout the whole entire Old Testament. That's just part of the Bible story. That's part of the story of getting to Jesus being the Messiah, is these wars and Israel having to fight wars and always having to go up against massive enemies. A lot of the Bible heroes that we think of, Joshua, Gideon, David, they were warriors. That's part of this fallen world. In Matthew 24, 6 and 7, Jesus warns that we will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. So obviously Jesus is kind of saying what's going to happen leading up to the end times, that we don't know when those will come, but there will always be wars, right? This also, though, like I said, it applies to our personal lives because we're always at war with the devil. So let me ask you this. When the evil one is attacking you, are you playing defense or offense? This is why in Ephesians chapter 6, Paul lays out the armor of God that we are to put on and be ready for a battle with the enemy, right? In verse 11 of Ephesians 6, Paul writes, put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. Verse 13, therefore take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Verse 17 tells us to go on the offensive with the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. So we put on the armor to defend ourselves from the devil, but we also carry that sword, the word of God, that helps us go on the offensive, fight the devil, take him on. He's always going to be there. You're never not being attacked by the devil. That's part of it. But we are equipped and prepared by God with the armor of God. And I only mentioned a few of the verses. I would highly encourage, if you're not sure of what the armor of God is, go read Ephesians chapter 6. Paul lays out every piece of the armor and what it represents and how it can protect us against these conflicts with the devil. And I'll just end with this. Thankfully, we have a God of peace. Isaiah 25:8 is very, very positive. It says, he will swallow up death forever, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces. That is promising. That is what we long for. We have a God who wipes away our tears and who is a God of peace. And so we're grateful for that. That includes wars globally, and we are continuing to pray for peace across the globe, but that includes our own personal wars as well.
Love it, Connor. Leave it to Connor Jones to take a Department of Defense rebrand and give us a good spiritual application from it, my brother. That was timely, and that was on point. Thank you.
Appreciate it, man.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about something, and I kind of entitled this section, A Crisis of Hope, specifically a crisis of hope in America. Fresh data is painting a concerning picture of the American spirit. Axios, which Connor and I read frequently, reports that belief in the American dream, the idea that if you work hard, you will get ahead, just hit a record low. Gallup finds that the image of capitalism has slipped to its weakest point in decades, and surveys show fewer and fewer people, since this type of polling began, feel optimistic about our country's future at this point. It feels like hope itself is under attack. Hope itself is under pressure. The idea that tomorrow will be better than today, or that effort leads to opportunity, is fading. And when hope fades, division and despair are quick to fill the void. So I do think that in culture, in media, we feel despair and division much more than we feel hope. So it'd be easy to take this in a partisan direction, or for me to simply say, it's time for us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And that might be my first reaction, honestly. But I truly felt the Holy Spirit nudge me in a different direction as I was preparing this. And I hope that you're all able to get something out of it, just as I have. So, Connor, before I dive into the specific results from this polling, do you have any thoughts on these initial results and polls? Is any of this surprising to you?
I would say it's not fully surprising. I think there is so much despair just in our culture, just because of, I don't know, there's a lot of side effects of things like COVID. There's a lot of side effects of things like smartphones and social media, and being told that you are not at fault for your own issues or whatnot, that there's no self-responsibility. Culture tells you it's somebody else's responsibility, that, you know, you're oppressed.
Truth is subjective.
I say that to say I'm not surprised by these results. I'm sad by them because I don't agree. I think there is so much to be hopeful for, and I think there is so much to be excited about within a capitalistic society. And I think you can point to literally any other country that is not capitalistic and be like, that's the alternative reality. But yeah, I'm curious to see what else you're about to present.
Yeah, so let me give some historical context and the numbers behind the decline, and then I'm going to kind of get on my soapbox, so just get ready. For generations, the American dream has been at the heart of our national identity. And in a lot of ways, it still is. I mean, we're having all these immigration issues because everyone wants to come here. True. Still. This nation is still the shining star of the world for people who are willing to take risks, who are willing to work hard and want to make a better life for themselves and for their family. So no matter what these polls say, I do want to point to that still is true of America, in my opinion. But today, the numbers show that the confidence in the American dream is eroding. Axios reports that only 36% of Americans believe that the American dream is still achievable. A decade ago, nearly 2/3 of Americans believed it was within reach. Now that, to a certain extent, makes some sense to me. Just inflation has seemed to go up so quickly. It seems like there are more and more obstacles to overcome than maybe there were 20 years ago. What I would personally argue is there are, at the same time, there's more and more ways to dig yourself out too. There's more and more opportunity, you know, like in this technological world that we live in. But I can see why that number is lower. It is simply just more expensive to live now,
I mean,
it seems
the
like.
cost of it specifically, I think housing is one of the things a lot of people cite is like,
housing and groceries and electricity. I mean, just the things that you literally have to have are becoming increasingly expensive, and something does need to be done about it. Gallup data also shows that only 36% of young adults now view capitalism positively, compared to more than 55% 10 years ago. This is not just a dip in confidence, it's a generational shift in worldview. So Pew Research finds that fewer than 20% of Americans now believe today's children will have a better life than their parents. That is nearly the lowest level ever recorded. And across the board, trust in institutions have plummeted. Gallup reports confidence in Congress, the media, and even the church has fallen to around 30% or lower. These statistics tell a story of fading belief, growing skepticism in a nation that feels like it's losing its foundation of hope. And again, we could point to the reasons why over and over again, but I'm going to take a specific angle on this. So let's talk about what's at stake. So what is at stake? Hope is not just an emotion, Connor. It's a fuel for action. Without it, we pull back. We stop investing in our futures, our families, our neighbors. Cynicism grows, division deepens, and without hope, the very fabric of society begins to fray. Without a collective hope, without a collective vision that unites us, just even this concept of believing in the American dream as an American people. Hey, the days are dark now, but tomorrow is going to be a better day. If the majority of Americans have that same hope and psyche, it's better for our country. But I would say that that's not what's happening right now, right? So we start to adapt a defeatist mindset. We choose to fail rather than choosing to succeed. And I mean it that way. That happens when we lose hope. When we lose hope and our mindset shifts from what's the point, then we've already chosen defeat before we ever really try, right? And I think that that's happening a lot.
Just easy example of seeing something like that is like a professional sports team that does not think they have a chance to win a national championship. So the team loses hope.
They won't.
So they stop playing hard. And then they're like, our only hope is to actually end up at the bottom so we get a top draft pick the next year, something like that. It's a mentality shift.
Correct. The mentality is super important. The mindset is very important. So I think about this often in my own life, Connor. Growing up, I had people who believed in me, who spoke life into me. It got me thinking about who has invested in me over the years and why I naturally do have so much hope and optimism just as a person. Why do I still believe so strongly in the American dream? Like I was asking myself, because like I'm reading those poll results and I'm like, well, I don't feel that way. And there hasn't been a point, no matter who the president's been, where I have just felt that low and hopeless about our country and about the world, right? So why is that? Well, first and foremost, it's because Jesus has changed my life. My hope is anchored in something far beyond and far deeper than the state of our country. So that never changes, that never wavers, no matter how bad the news has gotten. I mean, just think back, people, to during COVID years, how grim and dark and despair things felt, all of the infighting, all of the disagreement on how to go about it, right? Think about those moments when you're thinking about these moments now. Think back to all the wars this country has experienced. I'm not sitting here and telling you these are the darkest days in American history. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there is a crisis of hope. And so, but thankfully, as a Jesus follower, as someone who Jesus has radically changed my life, and that's my foundation, no matter what's happening in this country, I have that hope, and that never changes. And so that is the foundation for why I can have hope and why I feel the way that I feel. But I'm also grateful for the people that God placed around me strategically in my life growing up. And to this day, my grandparents and my mom gave me a foundation in Jesus, taught me the value of hard work, and refused to let me quit when things got hard, and reminded me again and again that I could do it, that I was capable, and I could accomplish whatever I set my mind and effort towards. That was my upbringing. And I am so grateful for that upbringing. And that's why I think twice when I read these poll results, and it's so easy to say, why do they feel that way? Well, my mind goes to, not everybody had somebody to invest in them.
True.
Not everybody had somebody tell them that you do have hope. Not everybody has had somebody say, I do believe in you, and walk through life with them, right? And so I recognize that, and I'm so grateful that I had that. But I'm also thankful for my mentor and my accountability brothers, my best friends. Connor is in that as well. Walking with them for many years has shaped me as a husband, as a father, as a follower of Jesus, as a friend, as a worker. The list goes on. And I'm grateful for my wife. We have grown up together in so many ways, and I'm better in every way because of her. Their presence has been transformative for me, all those people that I mentioned, and it continues to be transformative for me. But not everybody has that, like I mentioned. Not everybody has that. And when you don't, it's easy to fall into despair, because who believed in you? Right? Who was the hands and feet of Jesus in your life? Who reminded you over and over again that you are capable, that you can do it, that you are loved, that God has more for you than what this circumstance is telling you right now? Not everyone has grandparents or parents or mentors or friends who pour into them. And when you don't, it's easy to lose hope. That's why we're called as followers of Jesus to do something about it. And that's why the call on our life as followers of Jesus is so urgent. We're called to invest in others, to be encouragers, to believe in people when they do not yet believe in themselves. Hebrews 10:24 says, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. This is not a passive call. This is not a call, oh, when I feel like it, this is what I'm going to do. No, it's intentional. Who around you right now needs someone to speak life into them? Who needs to hear, you can do this? God has a plan for your life. You are loved. Who needs to hear that? Everybody take a minute and think about who in my life needs to hear that right now. This could be a younger person looking for guidance, a friend who looks strong on the outside but is probably battling on the inside, or someone who feels like they have no one in their corner. But investing in others is only one side of the coin, Connor. We also need to be intentional about who we allow to invest in us. So we can't walk through life and say, God, where are all of these people who need to be investing in me? Where are they? Well, if you're just asking that question and you're not putting action behind the prayers, you're not getting your butt out of the chair, well, it very well might not happen for you. You've got to get up and you've got to take action. You've got to intentionally seek out those people, make yourself uncomfortable, ask those questions, involve yourself in that church, in that family, in that friendship. You have to take that step. So Proverbs 13:20 says, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. So if we surround ourselves with cynics, defeatists, or people who only point us to despair, we will eventually share their mindset. If we place ourselves around wise, faithful, and encouraging people, that will change the trajectory of our lives, right? It will change the trajectory of our lives when we become intentional about who we allow to speak into our life and who we do life with. Before I kind of wrap this up with a challenge for all of us, Connor, what are your thoughts on that?
You're just so right. There's such a mentality that you have to have. It's also a spiritual heart set that you've got to have to find the right people to be in your life. If you are listening to this and you're like, man, I just don't have that. Okay. I would highly encourage you to step out, go into a church community or a faith-based organization, somewhere where you can really get plugged in and find like-minded people and find maybe people your own age or an older mentor, whatever it is. And there are so many churches out there with so many groups that are just longing for people to join them. Personally, my life group, I love it. It's other couples about our age with young kids as well. And so we're able to just pour into each other in that way. And then obviously, Micah, our friendships from DBU and so many other people in my life, family and all that has been so crucial. But I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of, you're looking for somebody to help you through life. That's totally normal. I would highly just encourage you to be bold and to go and seek that out. Same thing with, it's just like everything with the capitalism stuff. Like, you have to get up and go. You got to try new opportunities, maybe take a risk, whatever it is. And hopefully the Lord will open the door for you, whether it's in a job or in a community, whatever it is. And it's a shift in changing your mind.
Right, man. With work ethic, with friendships, with whatever it might be in your life, partner with God, go with God, and don't be afraid to fail. Do not be afraid to fail. I think that is one of the beautiful things about our system. You can fail so many times and you still might just have one more chance.
Think about Peter.
You might have one more shot.
Think about Peter.
You might have one more opportunity. That's true.
Peter failed 3 times, and then
literally
God used him
he denied Jesus 3 times.
And then God used him in such magnificent ways. So
Peter, the rock in which I will build my church, right? Beautiful. It's a beautiful illustration. Okay, so side note here, just to be even more practical as I wrap this up. Guys, mindset matters. If you believe the system is rigged against you, you will probably live as though it is. Like, you will live that way, even if it's true or not. That does not mean we ignore injustices or stop working for change or stop trying for change, but it does mean that we must be careful not to let discouragement dictate our destiny, because it will. And I'm not talking about manifestation. I don't believe in all that stuff. I'm just saying, like, your mindset, the way that you view the world, if you choose to view the world in a certain way, you're probably going to view it that way, especially with social media algorithms and just all the things that are thrown in our face. It finds out what you like and don't like, and it reinforces the way that you feel. Well, oftentimes feelings lie. So take a deep breath and remember what God's word says and what truth is. So when things are not going our way, that's when we need to pray, seek out wise counsel, and let God reframe our perspective. Keep at it and keep working hard. So here's the challenge. Be an equal opportunity encourager. I was told that a long time ago. I remember, I think like in youth group or something. Be an equal opportunity encourager. Encourage the ones who seem to have it all together. Encourage the ones who are clearly struggling. Encourage the younger generation coming behind you. Sow peace, sow joy into the relationships that God has intentionally placed around you. Speak life, and at the same time, be wise about who you let speak into you. Place yourself in circles where people build your faith and not steal your faith. And remember, hope is contagious. If Jesus has filled us with hope, then we're called to spread it, not hoard it just for ourselves. In a culture where hope feels like it's slipping away, our words, our prayers, and our presence may be exactly what God uses to keep someone else moving forward too.
Yeah, I think it's easy to have a pessimistic mindset about a lot of things. Maybe you're in an older generation, you're like, oh, this younger generation has no chance in the world. They're weak-minded or whatnot. Actually, if you look at a lot of data, it's the opposite.
That's not true.
It's just a common myth.
That wouldn't be true.
Yeah, there's a lot of data to suggest that Gen Z is a hardworking group. They want jobs, and they're very active in the church, more active than previous generations, actually. So it's things like that I think we can change our mindset. This is how Mom Donnie's become the leading contender in the New York mayor's race as a socialist, because people want
Mom Donnie. Okay.
You know what I'm talking about? Like he's got that got that mindset that is actually not great, but that's where we're at. Okay, Micah, thanks for taking us through that. Let's hop into several different things. Our tune in, check in, and hot take section here. Let's start off with a quick. It's kind of a hot take. I think we're both going to agree on this one. I just want to point this out because there have been two pretty viral moments in the last week at sports events where adults took items from kids. And what do I mean by that? I'm talking about at the U.S. Open tennis match. Yes. We had a millionaire CEO from Poland grab the hat of a player that he was trying to hand to a kid. This guy came and snatched the hat and ran off with it. And then he issued a public apology, kind of. He did a non-apology first and then a real apology. But in his non-apology, he was like, basically, finders keepers. He literally said, life is first come, first served. It's just a hat. If you were faster talking to this kid, you would have it. Okay. That's one.
Speed it up,
that's
kid.
One way to say that.
Gosh.
And then, of course, the super viral moment that I'm sure most people here listening have seen the video of this lady at the Phillies game running over and just chastising this dad who grabbed a home run ball for his son. The dad was giving it to his son, and this lady ran over and started just yelling in his face, basically, I guess, claiming that he took the ball from her. He gave the ball back. It ended up all panning out because the son got to meet the player who hit the home run, got a signed bat. Same thing with the tennis thing. That kid ended up getting to meet the player, get a signed ball, and it turns into a bigger spectacle, and it makes these adults look bad. I guess my question here is, Micah, do you agree with the Polish CEO that life is first come, first served, and it's just, whoever's fastest is the winner? Or do you always let the kid get the item?
This is a little bit more complicated. I don't agree with him using it in that way. Like, you watch that video, he clearly just snatches it from the kid. I mean, and the kid was just waiting patiently for it. It's just a kid. I would say life is going to teach that kid that lesson plenty, and that it's not his job to steal something from this kid who is patiently waiting for it and to teach him that lesson. So in this instance, I disagree with him. But life has a way of teaching you kind of what that Polish CEO says. Now, you can choose to not live life that way, right? But that's how a lot of people choose to live their lives.
In fact, that's how a lot of very just ruthless business people do it. They've got that mentality, like, I don't care who it is. I'm always on it to win.
Kill or be killed all the time, right? It's kind of the modern day hunter in us, right? That this is how we live today. And so, I mean, you definitely have to keep that in check, because that can bleed over into, like, you're going from the boardroom as a CEO to then you take that mindset where you're snatching hats from kids and you're like, listen, first come, first serve, kid. Like, well, okay, let's tone it down.
A lot of business titans like to say you have to be a killer. You have to be willing to just strike the prey and not care what anybody thinks or says. Anyways, that was just an interesting thing. If you haven't seen those videos, we'll post them in the show notes. Micah, you want to take us into check-in?
Yeah, let's jump into the check-in section. Okay, so first and foremost, just want to give you a few updates. So Vladimir Putin, the guy over there in Russia, floated the idea that Zelensky, who's the guy over there in Ukraine, we've talked a lot about this Russia-Ukraine war. Putin actually floated the idea of Zelensky coming to Moscow for talks. He did that in the last few days, and Zelensky shut that down quick and countered with, okay, no, let's meet in Kiev instead. All while Russia's attacks keep getting more and more intense by the week. Hot take here is Zelensky's got to give a little bit. I know they're going through a lot, but Ukraine needs this war to end. I know Russia does too, but Ukraine needs this war to end.
I kind of get this. Zelensky doesn't want to go to Russia. He knows that his chances of being assassinated while he's in their country are high.
That's true. I think that's high.
That ultimately they're going to have to meet in a middle country that is not their own.
Yeah.
That's what's ultimately going to have to happen.
Yeah.
But also,
you know what? They're both on extreme sides, and it's a negotiating tactic. They're going to meet in the middle. You know what, guys? Come back to Alaska. Let's talk again in Alaska,
because that went so well last time.
Yeah, because that worked out, right? And then the U.S. just also sent over a new Israel-Gaza peace proposal. Israel was on board since it would bring the remaining hostages home, which is kind of their biggest thing. But while Hamas leaders were meeting in Qatar to review the deal, Israel decided to launch an airstrike on the building, aiming to take them out. Reports say the U.S. was notified only after the missiles were already in the air. Trump said he learned of it too late to stop the attack and was very unhappy. I was just reading about this in Axios yesterday, how many people in the Trump White House were very, very upset that this happened because you're in the middle of a peace deal that they're meeting to talk about from the Hamas side. And then Israel's like, you know what? Let me just go ahead and take all of them out real quick. Now, this is such a difficult situation to navigate, right? But yes, I can see how that would be frustrating.
These Hamas leaders, they're terrorists in their own. They're never in Gaza. They're all billionaires, and they're living in high luxury life in Qatar, who is housing them and letting them to stay.
Right.
Now, should Israel have done this? I don't know. That's not up to us to decide. It's obviously made a lot of people mad across the world, including in the White House. Trump obviously being upset. And I don't know if it killed all of them, but it killed a few of those leaders. Anyways, we'll keep tabs on that. The MTV Music Video Awards, or Video Music Awards, the VMAs, were this past Sunday. I did not watch them. Micah, you probably did not watch them. Why? Because there was a much bigger deal going on at the time, Sunday Night Football. I don't know who put this up against that, but they did. And hey, you know what?
Of course I didn't watch it.
Why would? In fact, this used to be a massive deal. MTV barely has any relevance anymore, but all the A-list stars, all the A-list pop artists were still there. A lot of the female pop stars were the big winners, including like Sabrina Carpenter and Lady Gaga, Shakira, Ariana Grande. They won all the awards. It drove a lot of social media engagement. So I just wanted to mention it and say the fact that I don't think it really matters that much. It's not the Grammys, but hey, a lot of people still do.
Hey, you know what? If it matters to you, anybody who's listening, good for you. But I believe I was watching football.
I think most of America was. Anyways, this is Culture Brief. We're going to hit on all the things that culture is discussing, including the VMAs. Also, something I talked about a couple weeks ago, Cracker Barrel. They obviously reverted back to their old logo, and they also announced this week kind of quietly that they're not going to remodel their restaurants anymore. So if you were worried about that, there's your update. It's going to stay the old style. And then we already talked about the U.S. Open tennis match a little bit, but Trump was there this past, I think it was Sunday, for the big match between Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner. Those were the two and are the two best tennis players in the world right now. That was an interesting match. I watched a little bit of it, split screen with football, of course. Mike, I know you're a big tennis guy now all of a sudden, so maybe you've got some opinions there. But Alcaraz won.
I like tennis.
Yeah,
I like
you texted
tennis
this week and you're like, anybody watching the tennis match? And crickets. Like, not really big tennis crew here. But anyways,
I just like sports.
I know that these two guys are insanely talented. But a big thing that happened was Donald Trump being there caused a lot of delays for all the people to get into the stadium. And it's just interesting to read the results of that. And then also the was he cheered or was he booed? Depend on who you read. Some headlines literally said Donald Trump booed as he entered the stadium. Donald Trump cheered as he entered the stadium. I read several reporters who were on the ground. They posted on Twitter. They were like, honestly, they're both kind of true, but really there wasn't that much booing. And people were really just more focused on the tennis. All that to say, celebrities were part of the normal crowd for this event because they had to stand in the lines for hours alongside all the people. The spottings included Catherine Zeta-Jones, Michael Douglas, Ben Stiller, all hanging out in the long, long security lines to get into the stadium for hours. Some were hanging out in the cars because they couldn't find parking. So, Micah, I know you had some thoughts there.
Well, just because you and I were talking about it earlier, I'm just like, hey, guys, be careful. Your bias is showing. I mean, it was so frustrating. That's like, I can't even find the truth. Like, first of all, I didn't even really think about, how is the crowd at the U.S. Open going to react to Donald Trump? I didn't even think about it. But then I keep seeing all these posts that are like, a few cheers, but mostly boos for Donald Trump. I mean, all these liberal outlets just want to make sure that I know that the majority of those American people did not like Donald Trump. And then, you see some on the right that are like, everybody gave him a standing ovation. And I'm like, that's probably not true either. Conservative people, MAGA people, that's probably not true either, right? But I'm just like, guys, can we just stop being so petty for a second? It's so frustrating. And then, it took an hour longer to get in, and even celebrities had to wait in their cars and in lines to get in because of the security for Donald Trump. Get over yourself. I mean, it was just like this small, frustrating moment where I'm like, goodness gracious, there is not one thing that we cannot be biased about. Of course, it's going to take longer. A lot of people have tried to kill Trump, literally, and we've seen it. So, yeah, it's probably going to take longer. Everybody got in and saw the match. Take a deep breath, people.
Yeah.
Get a grip.
There's a little soapbox for you. There we go.
I mean, do you disagree?
No, I actually don't.
I mean, it's
I
just
thought it
like
was ridiculous.
Goodness gracious.
Anyways, a couple things to tune into this weekend. The Emmys are on Sunday night. Again, why are we doing this against Sunday Night Football? I don't understand. But it's on CBS and Paramount Plus. This one's a bigger award show. I'll probably try to tune in a little bit, maybe during commercials of the football game. This is going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern. And this year, here's the good news. It's hosted by a fantastic comedian, Nate Bargatze. He is a faithful man,
he's awesome.
And he's a clean comedian, and he's actually funny. Something awesome. A lot of hosts are not sometimes. So I think he'll do a great job. Top nominated shows include Adolescence, The Bear, The Pit, Andor, Hack, The Last of Us, The White Lotus, The Studio, The Penguin, and the top contender with 27 nominations is Severance. I've watched a lot of these shows.
Insane.
I do think Severance will probably win a lot of this. The Pit will win a lot of their nominations as well. And just going to be interesting to see. But Severance is kind of like everybody's big show this year, right?
Yep. Okay. And of course, we had football all weekend long. The football season officially kicked off this past weekend. I hope you all enjoyed it, just like I know Connor and I did. And the NFL debut did not disappoint people, let me tell you. Let me just give you some noteworthy things real quick. Danny Dimes, otherwise known as Daniel Jones, may have revived his dying career. He was with the Giants. Typically, when you're with the Giants, bad things happen, it seems like, recently. And so he goes to the Colts, and he looks like Peyton Manning out there. Just looks unbelievably accurate and mobile in the pocket. The Cowboys are not as bad as we thought. Connor and I got together with some friends, and we watched the game. And even though they lost, felt decent about the loss because they were playing the defending champions. But Jerry Jones made sure to say that he was so proud and happy with his team's performance despite a loss. And that just seems a little bit odd to me, and it just reminds me I'm not sure if winning is the goal, if all Jerry keeps saying is after his team loses, how proud he is and how happy he is with the performance. If you lose, I wouldn't be happy. But anyway. And then the Bills and Ravens game. It was a classic with the Bills making a comeback for the ages. They were down 15 with like 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. They stormed back. I saw something like 20,000 fans had left early because the game was in Buffalo. And there were thousands trying to stream back in, trying to get back in, but they couldn't get back in because they'd already left and they missed the comeback. And the Bills ended up winning like 41-40. It was an absolute classic.
They showed an aerial view and the stadium was half empty. And I looked at my wife. I was like, why is the stadium half empty? They technically still have a chance. You should never leave, people. Never leave if there's even a slight chance at winning because you might miss a miracle.
Well, I mean, if you have Josh Allen as your quarterback, you should never leave. But, I mean, there have been times I have left games early, and I typically do not regret it. It just kind of depends on your team. But, yes, if you're a Bills fan, don't leave early. If you're a Ravens fan, don't leave early. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Culture Brief, a Denison Forum podcast. All articles, all videos mentioned will be linked in the show notes. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please please subscribe, and rate and review the show. That's how we grow the show. Please share it with a friend, and we'll see you next Thursday.
See you later.
In a world of constant headlines and cultural noise, how can we respond, not just react? Welcome to Faith and Clarity, where we help you think biblically about the news and issues shaping our world. I'm Dr. Mark Turman. After nearly 40 years of leading churches, I've learned that theology isn't meant just for Sunday mornings or the classroom. It's for everyday life. On this show, I talk with Christians who are grounded in Scripture and real-world wisdom to explore and explain what faithfulness looks like in today's cultural confusion. From current events to discipleship, from worldview to service, our conversations combine intellectual depth with practical clarity, so you can live out your faith with compassion and conviction. Because following Jesus isn't about escaping culture, it's about engaging it with hope. So subscribe to Faith and Clarity with Dr. Mark Turman today, and let's navigate the world's fog together with biblical wisdom that transforms.